the son of Howell the Good, who I mentioned before. His name's on Coelbren on a monument, 948. Around 920, Owen is getting married, so they drew up all the necessary king lists to prove all his ancestry and pedigree and marriage to all the other kings. The list of the kings of the West Midlands contains at the bottom, hang on, let's get back, a very interesting statement. It actually tells you where Glastonbury is. It says this Glastonbury is called Lichfield. This is a bit of a shaker because it means that Glastonbury is 200 miles from where people think it is. And Glaston's in Cornish and in Breton is oak trees. Also Derwin and Glaston's is Welsh for oak, but also Glasdennan is the scarlet oak. And there's a long pedigree to this, but people have been looking in the wrong place because Glastonbury Abbey in Somerset wasn't founded until 942. So a little bit of history there. It does tell you what perhaps has been going on and how a bit of mayhem has been going on with the history. Okay? So what we've got basically here is Maddox is at sea, about 562. Gregory of Tours tells how the two great islands in the ocean. Gregory of Tours was in France, French nobleman and abbot. He writes the history of the Franks. He's alive at the time. Okay? His history still exists in great detail. He mentions how the two great islands in the ocean were smashed to pieces, set on fire from end to end, and people had to flee from them. So we've got a contemporary reference from another source outside the UK. Maddox at sea, comet strikes Britain. Okay? Jim, you can't spell Britain. 572, 10 years later, Maddox returns to Britain. 573, the Admiral verifies it. And 574, the King sails to the other world. It's what the Spanish call the New World. They call it the other world. The King is killed and mummified 578. He's returned 579, put in an unmarked tomb, but it's well described in the Songs of the Graves. It's in great detail. They name the field. And in about 580, Merlin, who is Taliesin, several references to Merlin. He says, "For I am Taliesin," means high intellect, and men shall call me Merlin, right? And he also says, "For I am Merlin, and men shall call me Taliesin." Merlin actually is Merlin, it means little horse. These people are Gnostic Christians, and little horse is the sort of power appointed by God, Sabaoth, to control benignly the world with intelligence and with enlightenment. Sabaoth is enlightenment, little horse is enlightenment. So what he's saying, "For I am Merlin, for I am enlightened, and men shall call me Taliesin, men shall call me high intellect." And the king is later buried out of the cave into St. Peter's Church at Coelbren. And it's well known that 168 histories in England that say that he's buried at Coelbren. You all you got to do is find Coelbren. It's not hard. Okay? What have we got here? Yeah. Most of the writing in Coelbren was done on sticks. They didn't often write on stone. But fortunately for us, they did enough of it for us to prove it and check it out. There's one stone in London actually dug up in St. Paul's Cathedral churchyard, and Arthur is always associated in the romance stories with stones in St. Paul's Cathedral churchyard for some reason or other. And that stone tells how the country is in a fallen and rotten and terrible decayed state. And it also says that the king intends to take a voyage. And it ties in with the prophecies of Ere, the prophecies of towards that which is beyond, which they constantly call this place where we are now. And on that stone there are clear messages which tie in, and there is it's a carving which clearly indicates the great dragon that they identified as the comet. So they wrote mainly on stone. The interesting thing is that tracing things backwards, we got back, as you remember, from Britain to Etruria, back to the Turkish area. These people were coming through Asia Minor, Turkey, at the very time that another group of the same group were coming through, known to the Greeks as the Chimeroi. And in Herodotus, they're the Cimmerians. Herodotus was writing histories from 460 BC. Apparently, these are the people who were planted in northern Assyria by the kings of Assyria, and in the various libraries of emperors of Assyria that were dug up by Layard, the archaeologist. They're mentioned and well, they're not just mentioned, they're described as the Cymry, K-H-U-M-R-Y, the Cymry. The Cymry took off, if you read the second book of Esdras, the apocryphal book, and they moved westwards, apparently when the mayhem was going on in the Assyrian Empire with the murder of the emperor by two of his sons. And they moved westwards, crossed the Euphrates, crossed the other branch of the Euphrates, and into Asia Minor. So there's a trace of these Cymry becoming the Cimmeri or Cimmerians, moving into this Trojan area around 650 BC. It's a very strange thing, but the Welsh are not the Welsh. That's an English word. It means strangers in High German. They call themselves the Cymry, K-H-U-M-R-Y. No different. And their language traces all the way back. Other strange thing is if you find the Bible and go through the Bible, you'll find a dozen or more references. There are one or two on the bottom of this page here from Ezekiel and from Numbers. And it says, Son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions, and then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph. The other one says from Numbers, take every one of them a rod, write thou every man's name upon his rod. And we all remember how Aaron throws down his rod, doesn't he, before Pharaoh, and it conquers the two rods of the Egyptian priests. They used to write on sticks too. So this writing on sticks is also recorded by the Hittites used to do it. This little alphabet was drawn up for Welsh school children in the 1800s by a couple of teachers, and you can see you've got at the bottom the Coelbren alphabet, or a version of it, and you've also got above it Ogham. And at the very top you've got the Arwen sign from which all these letters are derived, and Jim Michaels told you about that, how it appears on everything everywhere. In Britain it's on every government office, tax offices, Department of Agriculture offices, any jail they build, any army place, every piece of military equipment. So state cipher, and it's on documents of state signed by the king as far back as 1250 and probably earlier. It's a state sign. There we go. That's a stone. Where's this one from? Let me think now.
Grave Creek.
That's Grave Creek, yeah. The interesting thing is it's obviously in a Coelbren alphabet. It's unmistakable, and you have the Christian cross on the bottom. That's the most significant feature of it, and the statement ties up very well, readable Welsh. That's the alphabet as preserved by John Williams and by Llewellyn Shawn. Llewellyn Shawn in 1560, John Williams published it in 1846. And as you can see, he says, isn't it a little remarkable, all the above comprised, with 4 to 5 exceptions, all the old Etruscan or Pelasgic, he really means Phrygian letters, which were probably but little different from Greek characters used in the time of Caesar. When Julius Caesar landed in the UK, he wrote his wars as he went along, to extol himself, and he said, the British letters are very similar to the Greek. Ammianus Marcellinus, another Roman writer, says, the Greeks got their letters from the British. A bit outlandish. And there is, of course, the ancient story of Abaris, the Druid, going to Greece around the year 650 and teaching the Greeks. You never know. Again, this is published in 1906 by a lady, and James Evans, and she again exhibits variants of these alphabets as the thing was being mutilated a little because they were mixing it with Latin in the Dark Ages. Okay? This is an inscription again from an overhang which I think is known as the pig pen in Kentucky. There's a guy who keeps pigs under this overhang. It's not quite a cave. You can see the Arwen sign, you can see a tomb mound, and you can see an inscription which is part of a larger inscription, and it tells how they're crying out from the tomb. Again, more of that inscription from the pig pen. We have translated and deciphered the entire thing. No problem. There it is. That's another one, Coelbren inscription in America. This is a covenant inscription. It actually says, I'll translate it to you, towards strength to divide the land we are spread over purely, justly,